boys, welcome to my Season 14 Urgot Guide. Today, I'm going to teach you how to play Urgot Top, his fundamentals, his basics, and everything you need to do to hit high elo with Urgot. So the first thing you want to do going into a lobby is start identifying your purpose. So let's say your team composition is Urgot, Sejuani, Galio, Zeri, Lulu. This is a pretty standard team comp you might see in solo queue. Your purpose here is second damage carry, if you can identify it for yourself. The reason you are a second damage carry here is because your jungler is a tank, your mid laner is a utility, and then you have a support who is also utility. So this is a lobby situation where you're identified as a secondary carry, because your main carry will always be the ADC, but you're actually enabled to play the game here. So this would be how you've successfully identified yourself as a secondary carry. This is where you start looking Black Cleaver into solo carry items and solo agency. However, using a different example, let's say you're playing with Urgot, Nocturne, Lissandra, Aphelios, Yuumi. This is where you are playing utility yourself. So you have a lot of utility on your team. The Lissandra is utility, the Yuumi is obviously playing for your ADC. There's a lot of power sucked into the ADC. So this is where you have to identify you as yourself as an individual, doesn't matter that much. You need to go in, frontline for your ADC, and try and get out on 1 HP. So this is a lobby where you can't be a secondary carry. A third example is when you're solo frontlining, which is really common in today's meta. Let's say you have a assassin jungler, so let's say you have Kha'Zix on jungle, your mid laner is a Zed, your ADC is Caitlyn, and your support is Lux. So obviously you have 4 squishy champions now, so this is where you're a solo frontliner. So this is where you need fleet, this is where you need TP, so you can have a stable game, because if you're solo frontlining without having a stable game, you're going to have a bad time. So fleet TP, this is what it screams out to you. You want to go into Jack Show, Force of Nature, Dead Man's Plate, Fawn Mail, all these kind of items that can keep you in the game. Koenig Recurrent also served this purpose pretty well, but I'll talk about items a little bit later. But the general clause is you need to start identifying what Urgot's purpose is in the lobby as you're going into them. Because Urgot is a very jack-of-all-trades champion, but if you can take the jack-of-all-trades personality and specify it in a lobby purpose, it's great, right? So just because Urgot can do everything, you don't have to do everything in a lobby. You can fulfill one purpose on Urgot and master that purpose for that lobby, and then you're no longer a jack-of-all-trades champion, you're great at doing that one job. So maybe your one job is going in, taking a bunch of damage, disengaging, healing back up with fleet of minions, get the heal, and then re-engage, right? You've now mastered that purpose, you're no longer a jack-of-all-trades champion, you're the solo frontliner who's actually very impactful. So if you can correctly identify your purpose in a lobby, it helps your win rate incredibly much. So I can't understate how important identifying your purpose in the lobby is. Are you frontliner? Are you secondary carry? Are you 1v9 carry? Etc, etc. Think about the practicality of Urgot in that lobby. What do you need to do? Think about it. So, now that we know what your purpose in a lobby is, how do we use that purpose in our lobby? So we're going to talk about the laning phase briefly here. One thing you want to know about Urgot is cheetah recall. So what is cheetah recall? Cheetah recall is basically pushing the 3 first minion waves under the enemy tower correctly. So you want to not push the first wave at all. You want to be ideally only last hitting. You want the minion wave to be trapped in the middle. Then as soon as the second minion wave has joined in the middle, that's when you start last hitting, you start pushing minions to being last hit more. On the third wave, as soon as the third wave joins up with the minions, that's when you start hard pushing. Because Urgot has one of the best early games in League of Legends. He usually has priority. It's not 100% absolute, but he usually has priority level 1. And you're using that priority level 1 to set up the wave state so you can recall on the third wave. So, again, don't last sit on the first... You only last sit on the first minion wave. Start slowly pushing the wave on the second wave. And then when the third minion wave comes along, hard push. And that's how you set up a successful cheetah recall. Once you cheetah recall, you need to determine, are you going Col or are you going a longsword? Or HP? So, how you determine this is, if you're in a combat lane, let's say Renekton, Fiora, they're bruisers, they're skirmishers, they want to be drawing you, that is a longsword lane. If you're against Ornn, Cassante, something that won't die in laning phase, tanks are generally speaking what you want to be running Col against. And if you're against a brawler who has, you know, they stat check you through damaging you over time, you want to go HP, so you can just stay healthier with fleet. They have to kill you. They have to do an extra 150 HP damage to kill you. Blah, blah, blah. It's good. So, Longsword against Skirmishers. Cole against Tank. Ruby Crystal against champions that hard counter you. And it just gives you that extra sustain to stay in lane. So, let's talk about those three champion classes and how they play out. So level 1, let's say you're against a champion who is typically weak against Urgot. Let's start with Garen. Garen is a very weak early game champion. Urgot always has priority, so this is what you need to be doing against Garens. So on screen right now, I've drawn a little image on like where you should be positioning and how much area control you get from being in X area. So Garen is a melee champion, Urgot is a ranged champion. You want to play as much as possible to a ranged champion class as possible on Garen. So what you probably are doing right now, if you're low elo, no flame, there's nothing wrong being low elo, is you're probably pressing E on Garen as soon as physically possible. Keep in mind, with Garen, he's a true melee champion. He's not like Aatrox, who has opportunities to deal damage outside of himself. Garen has to be melee on you to deal damage, right? So what you want to do is, if Garen is running at you with Q, auto attack, walk backwards, auto attack, then E. This will allow you to space his E, because obviously when Garen knows he's going to get hit by E, he's going to press E, which is his spin ability. So you want to E him after running away from him to goad him forwards. Then you can space his E, and then you can take an even more decisive trade. Level 1, you can win against Garen very easily. Again, I'm using Garen as a main example of a champion that's your favorite against. But the general idea is, if a melee champion can only play like melee, you want to play as ranged as physically possible. If it's a melee champion who can play like ranged, like Aatrox, you play a little bit differently. I'll play some Aatrox footage on the screen right now in the background for you, just so you know how I approach Aatrox lane. Because again, Urgot is one of the strongest champions level 1. You have to be mindful of champions of Conqueror, because Conqueror do win out level 1 on the full engage. But if you ignite them, they usually act like monkey on fire, and they'll panic and they'll run around to their tower. So you need to correctly leverage your level 1 against champions by walking past the mini wave, establishing bush control, E starts, trade your shield into their HP, and then disengaging if it goes to a full trade, because Urgot doesn't win full trades against Conqueror champions, but it does against like Kale and etc, etc. So one core strategy Urgot mains aren't utilizing is EXP denying. So as you know, every first minion wave has 6 minions. Goes up to 7 when there's cannons, but the first minion wave always has 6. So what you want to do with the first minion wave is always deny yourself from last hitting the first 3 minions. You don't care about last hitting. You want to walk past the minion wave into the bush and stay in EXP range while denying them EXP range. Again, Urgot is one of the strongest champions in League of Legends level 1. So we're leveraging our level 1 against their weaker level 1 to deny them 3 minions of EXP. So if you're getting the EXP, no gold, and they're not getting any EXP or gold, that's a net positive. This now starts creating a really big angle to solo kill them, because you're going to get level 2 earlier than them, way earlier than them. You'll probably get level 3 earlier than them if you can successfully leverage this advantage against them. But the TLDR is, don't care about the first 3 minions of gold. Sure, you can, but you can get way more by just being more aggressive. The only champions you can't really do this against is champions that run Conqueror, because they can fight you level 1. You can still win against them level 1, just don't take it into a full trade. So the main thing against tanks, what you want to be doing, is you want to be focusing the HP over getting the gold from the minions. This is true mostly for like every single matchup, but against tanks even more specifically. Because tanks can't walk up level 1, because all tanks are weak level 1. You think Mundo, Ornn, Sion, they have one core ability they have at level 1, which is usually used for wave clearing. So Mundo runs Q, so he can last hit minions at a range. Ornn usually runs Q or W, and Sion obviously is starting Q to last hit. So as soon as they've used this ability on cooldown to last hit, that's when you start playing really aggressive, because obviously when the enemy team has no ability, that's when you want to slam Urgot's strength against them. Do note, your E does not have to land for it to be used as pressure. You can just E forwards to get the shield, auto-attack them, they auto-attack your shield, you auto-attack them again, they auto-attack your shield, and then you take it 100 to 0 trade, right? Because obviously, shields are temporary, HP is permanent. So your E doesn't have to hit for it to be a useful ability. It's luxury if E hits, honestly. You just need to start understanding with Urgot's E. You don't have to land it. It's some ability tool. It's a trade tool. If you can hit E, sure, it's great, but it's unrealistic to assume you can hit every single E. So that's why you'll see me on Twitch, if you want to come on by. I'll be using my E as an ability tool more often than the Urgot players usually would like to. So, that's a counter. That's a lane you counter. That's tanks. And then let's talk about a lane you're countered in. So let's go with Olaf. Olaf is a pretty common matchup. Olaf is very coin flip in the early game because, okay, so into Olaf as a default, you need to run combat summoners into him, which I usually run PTA Ignite. because Olaf is the way he is, you have to run combat summoners into him, because if you don't contest him early game, which is the only time Urgot can really win, you need to like have strength there to compensate for Urgot's kit weaknesses. So Urgot is a really good scaler, but if you can't get to the point of scaling to begin with, it doesn't really matter that you're a scaling champion. You need to fight champions that counter you early to get an either arbitrary lead or neutralize the weaknesses. So despite Urgot being one of the strongest champions early games, he has a really weak level 4, level 5, slightly strong level 6, 7, 8 really weak, and 9 very strong again. But yeah, the main way we want to mitigate the Olaf lane specifically is you want to play over your minion wave. So this is Rumble, this is Olaf, this is Poppy. These are champions that are stereotypically really good against Urgot. So the main idea is the same discipline of wave management. You want to push in the wave on the free wave crash, but the most important thing against these matchups is as soon as you come back to lane, the wave will be rebounding into you. This is why Cheetah Recall is so good. If you correctly Cheetah Recall, the wave will be rebounding. You hold the minion wave outside of your turret. This is the most important thing that you need to be doing against these champions. So the way this works, right, is since we Cheetah Recalled, we now have a gold advantage. Since we have a gold advantage, we need to leverage that gold advantage against the enemy later. So obviously, they haven't got a recall off yet because they're staying in lane. We've hard pushed the wave, so they have to be there to CS. They can TP, they can reset then TP to lane to like neutralize our Cheetah Recall, but then they're using a 5-minute summoner to mitigate something we did for 40 seconds, right? So that is a very equal trade for us, if not advantageous trade for us, because now you can bring your jungle up top. But the most important thing you have to do is freeze the wave here. So on screen right now, I'll be showing you a practical image of like how many minions realistically should be outside of your turret right now. You will have to lose some health to do this, but it's fine. You just have to do this. So if you let this wave crash, what's going to happen is the wave is going to die to the turret, obviously, and then your minion wave is going to be pushing into them when they have a gold advantage, because they get the reset off, they get to spend about 700 gold when we're on 450, 500. You want to walk into the first bush on whichever side of the map you're on, after tanking the minions for a little bit. Ideally, what we want to have is 7 minions outside of our turret to guarantee a freeze. We're going to lose some of our health to do this, but that's fine, because now the enemy laner is really severely over-positioning to try and break the freeze that we set up from the Cheetah Recall. So this is how you play against champions that stereotypically counter Urgot. You play with your minion wave always. And then you set up the freeze. Now they have to try and fight you when you have item advantage to break the freeze. And if your jungler has a brain, which is very uncommon, they'll come up top lane because you set up a perfect lane state. The enemy team is always overextending. You're always in a safe positioning. They've either burned teleports to neutralize the laning states, or they die. And this is how you leverage weaknesses against strengths. So, let's talk about items. Since we know how to play the laning phase now against whatever matchup we're against, now we need to know what to build for the lobby. So if you've identified your purpose correctly, and you know what to do in your laning phase, you've now successfully mitigated Urgot's early laning phase. So going into your first item component, this is when you need to start thinking about practicality against your laner. So let's say you're against an Aatrox who is worse than you. This is where you can rush Dirk. Let's say you're against a Darius who's better than you. This is where you rush Tabis. So these are the type of methodology you need to be using. So Gragas, if you're against a Gragas, you probably want to be rushing Mercs. You can rush Swifties to make him landing Q much more unreliable. Him slamming E on you when you have Swifties is going to be a lot harder. But Mercs against Gragas is just something that's very cool. Playing against Gragas. You want to go Tabis against Darius if he's, very much better than you. Because that's just how Darius plays. He wants to kill you in the time where he's stronger than you. Urgot's weakest time in the lobby is level 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He has like a somewhat spike on 6, but if your laner is stronger than you, then you never use the 6 spike. So it's like a half spike on level 6. It's not the most significant, but ideally, Urgot's strongest is level 1, level 2, level 3. He falls off level 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then level 9, he starts auto-winning because of Toggle. I'll talk about Toggle in a second. But this is what you're trying to itemize around. So let's say you've successfully managed to leverage something from level 1, 2, and 3. You've got yourself a solo kill, and you're against Aatrox. This is when you would rush Dirk, because now you're playing to steamroll. Let's say you got a kill on Darius, level 1, 2, and 3. He comes back to lane, you now have item advantage, you now go double longsword into boots. Movement speed is a very good stat against Darius, because obviously he has Q, E, which both rely on your positioning. His W is a slow also, which requires him to melee, so this is why Boots earlier are good against Darius, and Dirk is good against Aatrox because of this clip you'll be seeing in the background right now. But yeah, what's rated Dirk allows you to do, I'll show you, is this. Like, what's the counterplay? Aatrox was 100% HP, right?
You have slain an enemy.
So, that's pretty much it from components. Dirk, if you're steamrolling. Tubbies, if you need to be defensive. Mercs aren't that good on Urgot IMO. I think Mercs might be the most weak boots, in my opinion, for the core. Swifties are very good. If you like Swifties, please build Swifties. I've been preaching about Swifties for like 2 years now. I'm finally glad it's catching on, but Swifties are very good. Other components, if you're building into Black Cleaver, you want to be building into Phage first, because core builds is weaker than Phage. Movement speed again, which is very valuable. Movement speed might be the best stat on the game. And Hullbreaker. If you're building from Hullbreaker, you want to go into Retrix first, pair that with Swifties, or either rush Hullbreaker as its core and skip boots. So, let's talk about Hullbreaker and Black Cleaver. So, Hullbreaker is a tool that you use against champions who leave the lane, or you're so oppressively fed against that you can access their turret, right? So let's say you're against an Aatrox, you've managed to solo kill twice, you know that you're going to have access to his turrets. This is when you don't go Dirk, this is when you go straight Hullbreaker. So, Hullbreaker, you want to be running against Shen, because Shen is a champion that can't beat Urgot in lane, and he also wants to be roaming. You also want to start rushing Hullbreaker against any champion that's ranged that you start winning against. So let's say you're against Quinn top. Quinn is obviously a very hyper-mobile champion. They like to rotate around the map. Against Quinn, by the way, just TLDR, press E when she presses E, knockback, you'll have priority, ignite, dead. So as soon as you start leveraging advantages against champions that you have a default advantage against, like Shen, Quinn, etc., this is when you start going Hullbreaker. But you go Black Cleaver against stuff like Darius, because Darius needs more combat stats to win. Unlike Shen. Shen loses to Hullbreaker because Shen wants to leave the lane. Darius doesn't leave the lane, he's a very stubborn guy who stays in the lane. So Black Cleaver auto wins against Darius, Hullbreaker auto wins against Shen, because Shen can't beat Urgot as a default. So, since Shen is weaker than Urgot, he's weaker to Hullbreaker, because he wants to leave the lane. If they want to stay in the lane, go Black Cleaver. Do note, it's not worth going Hullbreaker after Black Cleaver, because unless your purpose in the lobby is to split push, you're never going to be really getting any value from Hullbreaker, because Hullbreaker mainly gets its value from killing plates, right? So, just keep that in mind. If you go Black Cleaver first, don't go Hullbreaker second. If you go Hullbreaker first, then go Black Cleaver, because these are Urgot's best items. But Hullbreaker gets weaker as the game goes on. Even with Hullbreaker on side lanes, you're probably going to get the towers you're going to be getting anyway with Black Cleaver. So, Hullbreaker is really good as a potential gold-grabbing item, but it needs certain conditions to be unlocked, right? So, Hullbreaker is a core item, but it's core if you can correctly identify when to build it, right? Black Cleaver, always good, can't go wrong. Item build paths, keep in mind these do date very quickly from patch to patch. Things change rapidly, but what's always reliable is Black Cleaver into Sterak's, Jack Show third item, and then just build tank items. If you want to stay up to date with patch notes, I do patch notes rundowns. When anything significant happens to Urgot, I'll do a patch rundown on it. I'll tell you what's happening, how you should start building. Because right now we're in 14.7. You want to be building Shojin on first item slot because they just made Shojin very strong. But maybe in 14.8 they'll nerf Shojin. So this information outdates quick. Stay updated by looking at my patch notes. So let's talk about power spikes. Urgot has 6 power spikes. Some are conditional, some are scaling. So let's talk about his conditional scaling power. 1 is if Urgot lands E on a champion level 1 or level 2. This can create the enemy to lose a ton of health because of PCA and Ignite being so strong, or in the early game specifically. The reason Fleet is so good on the Urgot right now is because it helps his consistency. But if you're an aggressive player who likes being a better player than somebody else, you should probably be running PCA and Ignite. I'll talk about runes in just a bit, but the TLDR is you can spike harder if you're an aggressive player than you would from a passive player. So this is a conditional spike that rewards aggression. It's landing E level 1, level 2, and leveraging that into a solo kill, which creates a spike, right? So level 1, 2, and 3 all have potential to be spikes. Level 4, you want to be putting a point into Q twice. So if you read Urgot's Q, the map will be on stream right now, it goes from 25 damage to 70 damage, 45 damage, very good. You always want to be doing this in every single lobby. Do not do double W point W. That was a sentence. Don't put 2 points into W. You always want to be level 4, 2 points Q, okay? This is also a spike, because now your Q is doing a significant amount more damage, and you can leverage that into solo kills. So let's say I'm against Akshan, Vayne. If I hit them with a Q 3 or 4 times, that's an E flash ignite kill angle. So this is a power spike that unlocked from me putting 2 points into Q. Against ranged champions, it's generally advised you put 3 points into Q to correctly leverage against them, because obviously W maxing against ranged champions rarely ever pays off, because we're not going to be using our W to damage them anyway. Q is the most reliable tool to hit them. As a short note, don't max E second, max Q second. So we do 2 points Q, level 4, max W, max Q, max E. The third power spike is hitting level 6, we unlock our ult. The next power spike is level 9 when we unlock our toggle. Our next power spike is level 13 when we unlock our max passive cooldowns. And then every other time we spike is based on when we buy items. So Urgot's, it's a very conditionally spiky champion, and we need to correctly use these spikes to guarantee our success. So flash coming off cooldown, that is a potential spike in the lobby where we can completely change the entire state of the lobby, right? But keep in mind, tempo, which leads into my next point. So let's talk about tempo. This is Talia versus Urgot top. Let's say there's a Talia in your lobby, she's mid lane, she's covering for their mid laner. She's covering for their top laner who rotated mid lane for whatever macro reason. This is a very common scenario that happens. Mages go up top lane to answer the Urgot. So what happens here is, if you have flash up, you can kill them at any point in time, but is it worth it? So, things you need to consider is Dragon up, Rift Heralds up, is Grubs up, is the enemy jungler nearby, is he on vision, etc, etc. So, this is where map awareness comes into play, and this is how tempo works. So, at any point in time, you can kill this Talia, but you need to determine, is it worth it? So, let's say your turret, or enemy turret is on 50% HP, if you kill Talia, you'll get that turret, but then maybe Volley Bear, enemy jungler, is topside. You kill her, he's there afterwards, you get 0 tempo because you just trade 1 for 1 while using your flash. This is a net negative because Urgot Flash can win lobbies. So this would be a time where killing the enemy laner wasn't worth it because we didn't get the turret, Volley Bear killed us, we used our flash, we're now useless for 5 minutes. This is a very realistic scenario, what happens like pretty much every single lobby. So just make sure when you're going for flash plays, it's worth it. So here's a play where it would be worth it. Dragon is up. Volley Bear has been seen on vision bot lane. So now we E-flash to Talia, who doesn't know it's happening, obviously, because, you know, it's Urgot E-flash, it's like a Malphite ult to react to. We kill Talia, she flashes away, we take the tier 1 turret, but not only do we take the tier 1 turret, we're now starting to pressure the tier 2 turret, while our team is pressuring bot lane Dragon. So no one is going to come up top lane to answer us, so instead of just getting a tier 1 turret, we're now getting a tier 2 turret, which is 700 gold. We can look for enemy Krugs, red buff, etc, or blue buff, Gromp, etc. And this is how we start using tempo in the game. Voice crack. But yeah, that's how you use tempo in the lobby. Be aware of enemy jungler position, use flash on cooldown, ideally only when you can really benefit from it. Urgot flash is pretty much a free kill. But if you're using your tempo incorrectly when using your flash, it's not going to lead or transfer into anything. If you use your flash at very inopportune timings, you're obviously not going to progress the lobby. If you don't progress the lobby, you're probably going to lose. Because Urgot is the king of mid-game, but he falls off a little bit weak late game. Not so much, he's still very good late game, but obviously you want to play to where Urgot has the highest win rate, which is 20, 25, 30 minutes. Now, let's talk about runes. So on screen right now, these are your runes. There are 4 rune pages that you can run. So the first one, I'm going to talk to people I spiritually resonate with. These are people who have an ego and believe they are better than every laner they go against as a default. This is your rune page for you. This is PTA, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Last Stand. This is Inspiration Secondary with free boots, which cooldown goes lower depending on how many times you kill the enemy laner. These are 300 gold for free, plus 10 MS, which is very nice for Urgot. And Cosmic Insight. So you run this with PTA and Ignites, because Cosmic Insight obviously gives you more flashes and more Ignites. You use the timer in between kills to kill the enemy laner with Summoners. The second rune page is the most generic rune page that Urgots are running right now. It is Scaling Consistency. This is Fleet, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Last Stand with Conditioning and Overgrowth. The reason this is good is consistency. You pair this with TP. The third rune page you can run is the same rune page with Demolish, and then the fourth rune page is just PTA with Demolish. You run PTA Ignite when you are in a matchup that you can kill. You run PTA TP when you're in a matchup that you can kill, but you don't need to teleport to do it. So let's say Jace. You run Fleet TP when you're in a tank matchup or any lane you want to just consistently scale against. And you run PTA, but you run Fleet with Demolish when you're against a Shen. So that's it for rune pages. It's very simple. Just decide which of these 4 runes you like the most. I highly encourage you experiment with all of these to find your vibe. Give it at least 5 lobbies on each before you determine or write one off. Fleet will feel bad the first couple of lobbies you use it, because you'll be like, what the fuck do you use this? But it's very good. So keep in mind, all Urgot players have a different playstyle. You need to find what your playstyle is and start adapting to that playstyle through experimenting. Speaking of experimental playstyles, if you're an aggressive player, you can start running Lethality and start taking over lobbies. Lethality is weaker on this patch, but Opportunity is still great. Profane Hydra is still great, etc., etc. You need to start playing Steamroll if you get ahead. Or you can just default to auto frontlining with a Jack Show, Starax lobby build for the lobby. This build works every single lobby because it's just consistent. If you're a consistent player, Fleet TP is for you. If you're an aggressive player, PTA Ignite is for you. I'll leave a tier list of all the champions I believe which is Urgot is weak or bad against. Use this in identifying your purpose in the lobby. Like, let's say you're against a Fiora. Fiora is a skill matchup. You can win it. If you start winning it, go into Black Cleaver after Black Cleaver. Start leveraging outside the laning phase. And I'm going to briefly talk about macro and stuff like that, but that is something that lies completely outside of Urgot. So, as a default, Urgot is one of the slowest champions in League of Legends. Unfortunately, he is blessed with 6 legs, but has one of the slowest base MSs in the game. This means your decision-making is very, 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 very important. Because if you make the wrong decision, you're going to spend probably like 20% longer getting to the play. So you're 20% more punished for doing that play, right? Because obviously enemies rotate faster, they have mobility, etc., etc. So if you make a play, it goes wrong, you already spent 20% longer getting there, you're going to die, and then you're going to go back to Fountain, and then you have to walk top lane. That takes 20% longer to get there because we have low base MS. So this is just a small note about decision making. You need to be sure when you're going somewhere that it is the correct decision. You need to either ping your teammates away. Communicating is really, really important here. If you don't think it will go well, let's say enemy lane is level 6, you're level 5, you have no ult, obviously you're not level 6, tell them to go away, because you're not going to rotate to this. You just need to play to your win cons that you can play to. At the end of the day, you should know what's best. If you don't know what's best, start understanding what's best and try and play more shot call oriented. But yeah, communicate. If you can't make it to a play, you don't think it's worth, you don't think it'll pan out well, maybe you're against a hard counter like Rumble, and the enemy jungle was ahead, your jungle was contesting grubs, let them die, you can't get there, they're being silly, as most jungle players are. So that's just a small note about macro and decision making. Make the right play to what you believe is the right play, even if it seems delusional, you're probably right. That's just how Urgot plays. So that's my Urgot guide. Let me know if there's anything I miss. If you need any help, there's going to be resources at the end of the lobby. There are resources on screen right now to help you with a bunch of other things. I do patch notes, I do champion rundowns, I do a toggling video to teach you how to toggle and what it is. So if I missed everything or anything, or you would like to know a little bit more, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to help you. 07s, and I'll see you in the next guide. Next guide, jungle. After jungle, mid, ADC, then support. So 07s, hope it helped. If it didn't help, let me know, and I will see you in the next video.